So I broke one of my own rules. I'm always telling my customers on their old cars, don't let them sit. Get them out and use them at least every other month. Even if you have to make up some stupid excuse like running some sort of errand or go getting an ice cream cone, whatever, just use it. Because that's much better on a vehicle, motorcycle, or car than just letting them sit. Well, my motorcycle here, the last time I rode it, was to come over to my new house, and I stuffed it in the back of the garage, and it's been there ever since, and hasn't been out of that garage in almost exactly 2 years now. Yeah, it's pretty dirty. So what this is a 2003 Suzuki Savage. Now, for those of you who know what the bike is, some of you at least will probably say, that's not a man's bike, or that's not a real bike. And you know what? I don't care. Roast me all you want in the comment section. It was cheap, which was a very big consideration at the time that I purchased this. For those of you who are not familiar with this model bike, it is a 650cc single cylinder bike. And this is new enough. This one has a 5-speed transmission. The early ones only had 4 speeds. I have been thinking about stepping up to a bigger bike, but I haven't wanted to spend the money. I'd really like to do like a Royal Enfield or a Triumph Bonneville, something like that, but you're just not going to get those for the kind of money I spent on this thing. Well, we'll see if I can remember how to get this gas tank off of here. You have to take it off in order to do like even spark plug service on this bike, which I've done before, but it's been a few years, obviously, since I've done that. So I've already got the speedometer cable disconnected. I believe that's has to be disconnected down here. Possibly needs to be up here, I don't remember. Got the fuel line, which we will probably go ahead and replace this fuel line because the bike is a 2003, so it's 20 years old now. And none of that stuff has been replaced as far as any of the fuel lines. And I've also had to off one other time to play with the carburetor because these things, when they were new, the exhaust system on them was actually not that great on them. They had a problem with backfiring and popping a lot. And one of the common things to do is to play with the richness of the carburetor. And on the forums, they all go the wrong direction and tell you to richen it up, which actually exasperates the problem. But the real problem is the original exhaust pipe had holes in the bottom of it to meet emissions requirements while they were still holding out with carburetors, because this is was a tough bike for them to try to put fuel injection on, because it being a 1-cylinder and a wasted spark ignition system, they didn't want to do the development to figure out the fuel injection. Now eventually they did, because there was a big outcry when they talked about getting rid of the bike out of the lineup because they couldn't meet emissions anymore. But those holes allowed the air in on deceleration, and that's what made them backfire so much. So this is not the original pipe here anymore, because it just so happens that a Harley, was an Electroglide, I think, pipe fits these things really well. And I had a friend who has one who had swapped out two Screaming Eagle pipes and gave me one of them to put on this. And somehow there was a weird way of sliding this thing to get it off of here. So it really was just pulling up on it. The left side just did not want to come out of its mount at all. Now, when I was a kid, I had a Suzuki RM125 dirt bike. And that's probably what let me to look at a Suzuki street bike when I decided after my divorce to get a bike. So I wanted just a nice laid back cruiser, and this is exactly what this is. So now I got the gas tank off. I got it over there draining into a can. These things have a vacuum petcock on them. So there's a prime and an on, and you never have to actually turn them off. And these can be problematic at times. Every once in a while, cruising on the freeway, it'll just stumble and not get any fuel, and you have to turn to prime and then go back. And that's always fun when you got a 18-wheeler behind you. It's really common to change it out with one from, I believe it's like a Yamaha Banshee, I think, will actually fit it. I have not done that mod yet. So everything in this thing is packed in really tight. So it's a tight fit, squeezing the carb out of there. Figured I'd go ahead and do a quick clean on it, because when I first turned the petcock on to prime, I was getting a bit of dribbling out of here as if the needle and seat had some dirt in it. Now the battery, we'll have to go ahead and probably take it in and have it tested, make sure that tests okay. There's no date on it. The date would have been on the box. Well, there is actually a code on here. This thing might have been purchased in 2020. I thought it was older than that. And while I never intended on showing the real fine details of, say, cleaning the bike or even necessarily cleaning the carburetor, I did intend on at least capturing the process of putting it back together. But after several hours of just polishing and cleaning on the bike, I completely forgot to turn the camera on while I was reassembling it. Yeah, that really happened. Maybe I should have called this channel something like Forgetful Garage rather than Bald Spot Garage. But in order to put the carb back on, I actually had to take the battery box completely out because there was no way to get this boot and carb actually in there with the space provided and with any kind of effectiveness at all. All right, so I didn't have too much fuel laying around here, but I got enough so we can start this thing. I'll just have to have it on reserve to start it. We'll start out now. Put it in prime position to make sure we get the carburetor primed with fuel. Give that a couple seconds there. Then we'll put it on reserve, pull the choke, and see what happens. All right, so the battery is going to have to be replaced. Winning. All right, so I went and got a new battery, so we got a nice fresh one in there now. Shouldn't have any more problems with that. Why? Still feels like I got a fuel delivery issue with this thing. Well, I might have to play with it a little bit because it doesn't seem quite happy at the moment. Well, I decided to go ahead and take the carb back off of it. I'm suspecting the possibility that maybe I didn't quite get it clean enough and there may be some varnish in some of the passageways within the idle circuit. So I'm gonna go ahead and go through it, clean it one more time, paying extra close attention to that stuff, and we'll see what happens. So as it turns out, The pilot jet, or what I would call the idle circuit jet, had some snot in it. So it wasn't allowing any fuel through. So either I didn't get it clean the first time, or something else I didn't get flushed out got sucked up in there and plugged it up. But I had actually forgotten that that secondary jet was in there, so I really didn't focus on it the first time around. So that's my bad. So now we got it back together once again, and let's see what happens. So if I'd have just paid a little closer attention, or even had the book out while I was messing with the carb the first time, we wouldn't have had to go back through all this stuff a second time and had the tank off, what, 4 times now, something like that. So let that be a lesson to everyone, including me. We got the caliper loose, got the pads out, and yeah, they're getting really super close. I wouldn't have wanted to go too much further than on these things. I do have some new EBC pads to put in here. So now that I push the piston back, slid the new pads in there, got everything tightened back down, we can bleed the brakes. Now I've got this thing sitting, since I'm working by myself, I put a rag in behind here, wadded up to where it puts the master cylinder pretty close to level. And of course the bleeder is 8mm, and I cannot find anywhere in my toolbox actually an 8mm boxed end wrench. So I've got to use a ratcheting wrench. That's the only thing I can find that'll keep it on there. So we just build up pressure, open it, let it bleed out, close it, build up pressure, open it, and close it, and just keep doing that until we're basically going to run the master cylinder really close. Do not run it dry. Of course, this is a really simple system, really short system, so it's not hard to get the air out. But you don't want to run it dry. And then when you get a little close to being empty, top it off, and just do that until we got nice, clean, fresh fluid coming out. This bike calls for .4 fluid. I always have .4 sitting in my shop. One of the things I like to do is just put a couple small holes in the seal. Don't rip the seal off. Then you can easily top off the master cylinder without spilling fluid all over the place. Takes a little longer to do, but works really well. Now I'm gonna go ahead and test ride this thing before I go ahead and put the windshield back on it or the saddlebags, but I gotta go gear up first. Be a responsible rider with your own bike. Wear the proper safety gear and be a defensive rider. There's lots of idiots out there who don't even think about motorcycles. They will pull out right in front of you, change lanes right into you, or mow their lawns and blow it all over the road, and you never know when you're gonna end up going down on a bike. And you can have mechanical problems. A friend of mine had just bought a Honda CB bobber. It was a hardtail. Thought it'd be fun, nostalgic, because he used to own one many years ago. Third ride, transmission locked up going into third gear. He couldn't save it and he went down. Lucky for him, he had a full face helmet, a brand new Harley Davidson riding jacket with all the elbow pads, everything, gloves, the whole works. And if he hadn't been wearing that, he'd have been hurting a whole lot worse than he was. As it was, when he went down, he instinctively caught himself, disconnected his wrist completely. Ended up having to have several surgeries, had 5 pins put in. Took him 1.5 years to get enough movement in his hand again to even be able to operate the throttle and try riding again. So no matter how much of a badass you think you are and how much you don't need that safety equipment, we're all human. That skin will come off of the hard ass just as much as it will the not so hard ass. And that head will crack open just as easily, bones break just as easily, no matter who you think you are. If he hadn't been wearing his helmet, he would have ground half his face off. That helmet was destroyed. And so was the leather jacket. So be safe out there.